Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Cahill and welcome back to my channel. It occurred to me today that I've been writing for a very long time. 17 years to be exact. And while I don't feel like I'm quite a level 17 writer, I do know that I'm at least not a level 1. So today I wanted to think back on my past writing with the knowledge that I have now and talk about the mistakes that I used to make as a newbie writer. I say used to, but I probably do still make these mistakes now, and there's nothing really wrong with that. The first mistake that I used to make as a newbie writer was trying for perfection. I only really dabbled in writing when I first started at about 15 or so years old. Writing fun stories, doing this, that and the other. Never took it like super seriously. Even though I was always like, I will be an author one day. I still remember very vividly writing my first ever novel. It was going to be a trilogy. The trilogy was called the Guild series. The book itself never actually had a title. I had sort of vague ideas for what that trilogy would look like. And while I don't remember the whole process, I do remember getting stuck at one particular point in the third act, towards the end of the book, that for the life of me I could just not write, and I got stuck at the end of that book for about a year because everything I wrote I didn't like. Every idea I thought of, or everything I tried to write down, it didn't match what I had seen or sort of come up with in my head. It wasn't good enough to put down on a page. So it took me ages and ages to finally finish this first book. And I think at one point I just sat there and went, you know what, I don't care what it sounds like. I just need to get it down on a page, otherwise this book is never going to get finished. And then keeping that in mind, I still have the book somewhere. I can read what I wrote. It's probably terrible. I just sort of finished the book. Trying for that perfection, that making it right on the first go, that is what kept me from ultimately doing what I had set out to do in the first place, which was finish the darn book. It's very difficult when you're a writer to remember that perfection doesn't actually exist. Like, I could come up with what I think is the perfect sentence in my head, or the perfect scene, or the perfect plot, but trying to get your thoughts onto the page in that perfect way sometimes doesn't work out. And it sort of bleeds into editing while I write. Is something that I still can't do to this day because it will keep me from finishing. I know some writers do like to edit as they go, and some writers prefer it that way. It helps them. Whatever way you want to do it is fine. But trying to get things perfect and the plot making sense and the characters just right when you're writing the first draft, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, and that is a mistake that I still make. There are times now when I'm writing and I'm like, no, I don't like how that sounds. Delete to get, nope, that doesn't make sense, can't put that in there. And those thoughts are fine for second, third, fourth drafts when you're rewriting. It's not okay, at least for me, when I am writing the first draft, because with the amount of times you're going to edit the first draft, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. All that matters is that the word's on the page and that the book is done, so you can take that next step. Mistake number 2 that I made: following the rules, which are more a set of guidelines than actual rules, let's be honest. Especially now with social media and all of the writing advice, writing tips that you see on Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, Instagram, or whatever other social media platform there happens to be that you are on. You get a lot of different advice from a lot of different writers who are in different stages of their journeys. They've been published for ages and they've got over 100 books. They've just started to learn, they've taken writing courses from these people, they've gone to university or college. And a big difficult thing that I had, especially when I started dabbling in social media and, you know, being on these platforms and reading this advice, is taking that advice seriously. Things like don't use adverbs or only use active voice. You have to read every day, you have to write every day. All of these things I sort of internalized when I was younger, And it gave me this awful thought that if I'm not doing all of these things, then I can't be a writer. If I don't do all of these things, then I'm not a good writer. And that brought me down so much and so often when I first started taking my writing seriously and listening to all of this advice. It didn't do me any good. So eventually I sort of learned to do what it was that I wanted to do and do what worked for me and how I wrote, and that has made me a much happier person. The rules that you see are guidelines. They might work for some writers, they do not work for all writers. And you can't base how good of a writer you are on how often you write or how often you read, although writing a lot and reading a lot can assist you in growing and learning. It doesn't mean you're a terrible writer, okay? That one's important. Am I saying don't listen to writing advice? No, I'm saying listen to the writing advice that works for you. Try writing advice if you think it will work, and if it doesn't vibe with you, don't do it. Don't listen to advice that starts with you have to or you must, because you don't have to and you don't must have to do it that way. Breaking the rules or ignoring the rules as such, has just made me a much happier writer and person in general. Third mistake I used to make as a newbie writer is writing too much description or exposition in my work. We'll talk about the Guild series again because that's the one that I've got in my head at the moment. That was the very first book I ever wrote. Most of the mistakes are going to come from this. I had created my own world, very, very basic own world. So it was like a high fantasy, and I spent a good 5 or so pages describing the world that this book was set in before I got to the characters, because I was proud of the world that I'd created, right? I was proud that I had done this thing. So I want everybody to see this world as I see it in my head. And I thought that was the most important thing to immerse the readers into the world, was to describe it. Like it's a snapshot in a movie where it goes through, you know, the setting as you can, and you can see everything and sort of understand how I thought that's what I had to do, okay, in order to set the scene. I've since learned that no, you start with the action as soon as you possibly can. But that's what I did. I used to describe things so much because I wanted the reader to get a true sense of what was going on. And there'd be big chunks of description and then a little bit of character and then description and exposition. It was just too much. It was too much. I've learned to scale it back a little bit. I've learned to sprinkle in the details. What I like to do is focus on what I think my character would focus on when they walk into a room or when they walk into an area, and then as the scene continues, then describe little bits of the scene a little bit more as we go, so it's sprinkled throughout the scene and not in one lump at the beginning of the scene. Too much description, I think, just drags everything down, and just there's nothing interesting about it. What's interesting about the book is the characters, is the plot, not where that happens to take place. I don't do this as often now. I feel like I can, and I do know that I do have some quite not very small chunks of description somewhere in my books, but I've learned to pick those out and scale them back during rewrites. The fourth mistake I made as a newbie writer, and I still do this a little bit as well, is worry about originality. Look, there is no such thing as an original thought, okay? I mean, Harry Potter and Star Wars basically have the same plot, as does Cars and Thor, the first movie. Any idea that you think of in regards to a wider plot, someone has already done that story. What makes it different is the characters you put in, their internal struggles, their goals, their wants, their needs. It's how you spin things, it's how you change things, it's how you twist things, is what makes your book original, is what makes it different from another book. That also sort of wormed its way into inspiration that I would take from TV shows, movies, books, thinking, oh, that would be a really cool idea if I did that. Oh, but I can't do that because that's literally this movie that I'm watching. You can get inspired from the ideas that you see and the ideas that you read. You just can't take and copy it exactly. You know, you can't take the same characters and change their names, but keep their personalities and how they would react to things. But don't let the thought that this is not a new story, this is not original, hold you back from what you want to write. There are some people that like originality, but there are some people who are more than happy to consume the same story in a different setting with different characters over and over and over again. It's called fan fiction. The fifth mistake I made as a newbie writer was thinking my first book would be the one. I do it now, still. I think, yeah, this will be the book that'll get me published. It's probably not, which is a shame because I like all of the books I'm reading at the moment. I didn't do this with the Guild series. I did this with my first big series that I started writing called Nephilim. I was writing that book and I was like, this is it. This is the book that is going to get me published. This is the book that I'm going to edit and I'm going to send off and I'm going to get an agent and I'm going to get a publishing deal and it's going to be in all the shops and these are the sequels that I'm going to write and this is going to make me big. That book is shelved now. That book is shelved because I was focusing so much on this being the one that I spent all my focus on it. I think I reached the 7th draft and I was still making major changes to the plot to make the plot and the character arcs within the plot make sense. And all of those edits that I did sort of made me lose my way with the book. Like, I've reread it recently and I was like, they go here, they do this, they go here, they do this. It's basically the same event happening over and over and over again, and then they find information and then it's the same thing over and over and over again. Because I love this book so much and I love these characters, I was determined to make this the one, and it took me a very long time, 7 drafts, to sort of stop and go, I can't keep doing this book is not working. I can't make it work with the skill that I have now and with the knowledge that I have now. So I need to stop wasting my time on it. This is not the one and I need to try other things. And I'm not saying it's a dangerous thing to think, oh, this book is the one, this is going to get me published, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. There are times where I will sit back and go, you know what, I will go back to Nephilim one day with all of the things that I have since learned as a writer, and I will redo the entire book and it will be fantastic because I still do love the plot that I had. I know it's not the one that's going to get me published. I don't know what the one is going to be, and I think that's okay. The 6th and most important, or most worst mistake that I made as a newbie writer is my lack of research on the writing process. Right, look, okay, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna admit it, all right? When I first started writing, I was like, I'm gonna write a book, I'm gonna write the first draft, I'm gonna send that first draft off to the publishers, not an agent, the publishers, and they're gonna want to publish it, and then I'm gonna get published. Is what I thought. That is honestly, honest to God, what I thought. But I was 15 years old, okay? That's how I thought the writing industry worked. I did not have internet when I was younger. Oh, okay, I did. The internet had just started when I was 15-ish or so years old, okay? That's how old I am, right? I started writing before the internet became a thing, okay? We didn't have social media. We didn't have all of this knowledge available at our fingertips about how things work. So I that's what I did. I was like, first draft, don't even need to revise it. Don't even need to edit it. And then I sort of realised later with the Guild series, oh, I need to edit it and make it better. So I started editing it. I did a very terrible job, by the way, when I was editing it. And then as I got more involved in social media and this information became more easily obtainable, rather than me having to get my parents to drive me to the library so I can try and find books on the publishing industry, if that was even a thing, I don't know. Then I sort of learned how things work and what I need to do, and the processes, sort of what I needed to do, how I needed to do it, and then I could learn from there. Now, am I saying you need to know all of this stuff before you start writing? No, you don't. You can just start writing. But if you want to take writing seriously and if you want to be published, looking into how to get published and looking into the work that you need to put into a book to make it acceptable to send it to agents and start querying, that is a very important thing that you need to do. Did these mistakes hold me back as a writer? Not really. Did these mistakes make me a bad writer? No, not at all. Level 17 writer, that's what I am. There were things that I used to do that I then learned not to do, even though I do still do some of them. But I've learned how to cope with still doing them. Making mistakes as a writer doesn't mean you're a bad writer. Mistakes are there for you to learn from and grow. So I'm always more than happy to take mistakes as a blessing rather than put myself down for making them. And I think every single writer should do the same. That's everything for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what were some of the mistakes you made or still make as a writer, and I will see you in my next video. Good thoughts and happy writing.